The 2026 World Cup will be absolutely revolutionary for world football. For the first time ever, the tournament will be hosted by 3 countries: Mexico, USA, and Canada. Moreover, for the first time ever, 48 national teams will be taking part in the event. For what it's worth, this idea has both certain pros and cons to expect. However, what FIFA is about to do with the 2030 World Cup is nothing but a mockery of common sense. Hi there friends, subscribe to our channel so you won't miss new videos. Today we are gonna analyze what's wrong with the 2030 World Cup. Let's get into it. The 2030 will mark the 100th anniversary of the main international tournament. The first ever World Cup was held back in 1930 in Uruguay, the winners of which were the hosts, 4-2 after the final whistle against Argentina in the final. It's this historical fact that motivates FIFA to justify the nonsensical initiative they brought up for the 2030 World Cup. In order to honor the tournament's anniversary, these geniuses decided to hold the tournament in 6 countries on 3 different continents. Oh yes, you've heard that right. This is exactly what they are planning. Since the first tournament was played in South America, FIFA thought that it would be a great idea to have the first 3 games played in Uruguay, Argentina, and Paraguay. These will be held in the 3 capitals of these states: Montevideo, Buenos Aires, and Asunción. All other fixtures will be held in 2 European countries, Spain and Portugal, as well as in Morocco, which is located in Africa. But nothing to complain about here since all mentioned countries are more or less close to each other. To make their outrageous idea work, FIFA has already developed some absolutely insane schedule. June 8th-9th, a ceremony to celebrate the 100th anniversary of the World Cup in 3 South America countries. The opening 3 games of the tournament are also expected to happen in these couple of days. And just like that, in a 5-day span, on June 13th-14th, the World Cup will be back on track. On June 13th-14th, we have another opening ceremony, but this time in Spain, Portugal, or Morocco. Absolute nonsense, because after the actual start of the tournament, fans will have to wait almost a week for the competition's 4th match. On June 15th-16th, other teams from the Argentina, Paraguay, and Uruguay groups will play their matches. Okay, that's now just truly exceptional stuff from FIFA. What does other teams stand for if, according to the new format, this other team is basically only 1? If there will be 3 teams in the group just like in 2026 World Cup, then it brings us to June 15th-16th with one of the national teams playing against one of the teams that played in the opening matches in South America. Anyway, the teams playing the 3 opening matches in South America will have to fly to Spain, Portugal, or Morocco. To fully understand how bad this idea is, it would be enough to check out the distance from the capital of Uruguay, Montevideo, to Madrid, which is 9,942 kilometers. And if you fly somewhere to the north of Spain, the distance from Uruguay will be more than 10,000 kilometers. One can only imagine teams' physical condition a week after the tournament's opening. In other words, as many as 6 national teams will have to overcome unbelievable distances and play in completely different time zones. For example, when it's daytime in South America, it's always late evening in Europe. Changing time zones is a difficult process that seriously affects physique. This fact itself gives teams they will be playing against a slight advantage. All this tournament just for the sake of 3 games, which can have a rather low rating. At the last World Cup, Qatar was facing Ecuador in the opener, and let's be honest, it was not the level that most of us would want to see in the opening match. It's unlikely that many people in Europe and Asia would choose to stay up at night in order to watch the battle between Paraguay and, for example, New Zealand. The final is scheduled for July 21st, which means the entire race for the most valuable international trophy will last as much as 1.5 months. Don't forget that in a few weeks after this marathon, the footballers will have to return to the clubs and kick off the new season. Give this video a like if you too consider the idea behind such a World Cup being absolutely absurd. Here we would like to dwell upon another obnoxious decision made by FIFA. Argentina, Uruguay and Paraguay will be hosting only one match each, but they'll get direct tickets to the main World Cup campaign. Earlier on, 4 national teams out of 10 were guaranteed to participate in the World Cup from South America, and the 5th place was playing in an intercontinental playoff. Due to the increase in the number of participants, South America received 6 quotas, with the 7th place proceeding to the playoffs. You see, 3 quotas from CONMEBOL have already been taken for the 2030 World Cup. Thus, instead of 10 teams battling things out in a qualifying tournament, we'll get 7 instead, of which 3 will end up in the World Cup, and the 4th will fight for its chance against someone from another confederation. Just some kind of farce going on, isn't it? Yep, Argentina and Uruguay are not only permanent participants of the World Cup, they're also regulars to the playoffs. Meanwhile, Paraguay missed the last 2 campaigns, and in recent years, they've been performing significantly worse than Chileans, Colombians and Ecuadorians. Despite that, the Guaranis will still play at the 2030 World Cup solely because Asunción will be hosting one of the tournament's fixtures. Another paradoxical and no less obscure situation. As a rule, when someone's bid to host the World Cup or Euro takes the cake, there is always a clear plan which cities will host certain games. Even after the official announcement of the 2030 World Cup hosts, no one can still say which city's venue will be taking responsibility as a place for the decisive match of the whole thing. The favorite is, of course, Madrid, with its incredibly renovated Santiago Bernabéu. But even Spain football officials cannot decide in the matter, since Camp Nou is also included in the list of contenders for the final, which will also undergo reconstruction and therefore look no less spectacular than the Bernabéu option. Nevertheless, it's not even guaranteed that the final will be held in Spain, because Morocco openly speaks about its intention to host the decisive game. The local authorities assure that Casablanca is an excellent venue for the final. With that said, they would also agree on the semi-final in their country. At the moment, the most likely scenario is that Casablanca and Lisbon will be hosting the semi-finals and Madrid will host the final. But the very fact of no certainty being displayed on this aspect is kinda surprising. Yes, the Sheiks also had something to do with the overall madness. Let us explain how. You see, by giving the 2030 World Cup to 3 continents at once, FIFA opened up a great opportunity to switch to Asia in 2034. Moreover, FIFA actually confirmed that the 2034 World Cup is to be held in Asia or Oceania. Following the example of 2030 World Cup, one may predict FIFA to hold the World Cup on 2 different continents. A good scenario would be, for example, to hold the tournament in Australia and New Zealand, who proved themselves very well on the pitch during the last Women's World Cup. Besides them, neighboring Indonesia could also enter the bid, as football is very much loved there, with even the matches of the local league getting more than 60,000 fans in attendance. Unfortunately, the Daily Mail reports Saudi Arabia is set to host the World Cup in 2034. We put unfortunately for a very good reason. Last year, we already witnessed the World Cup going on in an authoritarian country, where the death penalty still looms its shadow, and the understanding of human rights hugely varies from the generally accepted ones. And before that, the most well-known football event was hosted by a country that 4 years after the World Cup unleashed the bloodiest war in human history after the World War II. FIFA constantly flirts with the Saudi sheiks by giving them the right to host the Club World Cups, and they finance the organization's dubious projects in exchange for whitewashing their own reputation. Such actions not only have a bad effect on FIFA's reputation, but also on the #1 game as a whole. Last year, Spain and Portugal joined forces with Ukraine in a bid to host the 2030 World Cup. The whole announcement looked very strange from the very beginning, since it was done at the height of the full-scale war in Ukraine. No one knows in what year it will all come to an end, and whether the infrastructure would be ready to handle such a huge celebration in 2030. Initially, the Eastern European country was expected to host matches of one of the groups. Earlier this year, Spain and Portugal have announced Morocco as the new member of their joint bid. Funny enough, but no one officially said that Ukraine is excluded from it. On the contrary, officials insisted on Morocco being only the fourth member. What did we see a few days ago? Ukraine mysteriously disappeared from the overall bid, with the 2030 World Cup being held in 6 countries without it. Nah, the very fact of Ukraine no longer having its place in the bid is not surprising. It looked like outright populism amid Russian invasion from the very beginning, although it's rather the silence that raises some questions. But there is an explanation for these too. The fact is that the Ukrainian FA president, Andriy Pavelko, also known as the vice president of UEFA, is now in pre-trial detention. In Ukraine, he's accused of corruption. Pavelko laundered money from the construction of artificial football pitches in the east of the country, which is why he's being held in custody, waiting for his final sentence. Oddly enough, but Morocco's inclusion in the bid coincided with the moment of Pavelko's arrest. So, coincidence or not? Apparently, no one even thought of waiting for the final verdict. The very fact of cooperation with a person suspected of corruption puts an end to the hopes of holding the World Cup. But talking about it in public would also be damaging. Therefore, the matter was settled quietly, without making any announcements. The FIFA Council is the main decision-making body of FIFA. It consists of members which include FIFA President Gianni Infantino, elected by FIFA Congress, and 8 FIFA Vice Presidents. Sheikh Salman, AFC Senior Vice President, Alejandro Dominguez, CONMEBOL, Victor Montagliani, CONCACAF, Alexander Ciferin, UEFA, Lambert Matlock, OFC, Patrice Motsepe, CAF, Shandor Chaniyi, UEFA, and Debbie Hewitt, UEFA, as well as 28 other members of the FIFA Council. Simply said, there are 37 people who unanimously make such an important and outright absurd decision. There is not a single former footballer or person in any way connected with the game sitting in the FIFA Council. Only 37 officials, whose first priority is money, then money, and then more money, and finally, money.
Hello, I like money.
These guys don't think about anything else at all. Otherwise, such a nonsensical decision wouldn't have been taken unanimously. At least someone with the right mind would be against it. However, with everything agreed in advance, no one even dares to vote against it. We all remember the scandal surrounding Sepp Blatter and a bunch of various top-ranking FIFA officials. It looked like that after the investigation, the problem of corruption in FIFA should be at least partially solved. But at the moment, everything looks like the problem is not solved at all. This leads us to the idea that something needs to be completely changed. At least, those involved in the game should be appointed to take part in the world football management. Someone inside FIFA should talk about footballers who wouldn't take a 10,000-kilometer flight to one match as a blessing, even if it's a World Cup game. Needless to say, the football community reacted quite sharply to the initiative of having the 2030 World Cup played in 6 countries. For example, Mauricio Pochettino is extremely unhappy of not being able to come to one country and watch 3 games of the tournament, as was the case in Qatar. It was at the Qatar World Cup. It was fantastic because we could watch 3 games in one day, the Chelsea manager said. 35 minutes from one stadium to another. I said we need to find a place like this to repeat the World Cup every 4 years. The opportunity to live the experience of the World Cup in Qatar was fantastic. I was in the stadium, I'm living the World Cup experience. But outside there was also the same. That's my point of view. In my opinion, you cannot live the World Cup if you're only having one game. France legend Emmanuel Petit publicly slammed FIFA. When it came out in the press, reports about the Six Nation World Cup, I actually thought it was a joke. Seriously? They put pressure on us and they point the finger at us today if we don't respect ecology, if we don't take the right actions. Do you think a little about ecology? Do you think a little about the supporters? It's already super expensive to follow your national team. For me, it's nonsense. It goes against the grain of the world we live in today. It only reinforces the image I have of FIFA. It's a structure that lives in a tax heaven and is beyond all suspicion, which doesn't really care about what's happening in the world, except to rake in ever more money. And what about the players? The time differences you are going to experience, the travel, the logistics. I'm very surprised that no politician is stepping up to denounce this. The head coach of RB Leipzig, Marco Rose, stated that one day the World Cup will be held on Everest with such trends progress. We are constantly tightening the screws, looking for innovations, something special here, something special there. At some point we will play on Mount Everest if FIFA discovers a soccer pitch there and finds a new market. Then we have the coach of Mallorca and former Mexico coach Javier Aguirre simply calling this idea bullshit. I always went to all World Cups. Now I have to spend all my time on the plane. What a bullshit! And this eloquent note is what concludes today's episode. Don't forget to subscribe to our project because every week we will surprise you with something interesting to think of. Have a good day and see you soon!